If you have a desire to make photography your full-time income, I want to tell you one thing I wish I knew when I first started out. And that was the importance of choosing an uncomfortably specific niche. Because the truth is, you can't be everything to everyone. So if you have a passion to photograph horses or 1-year-olds or elopement weddings or second-time weddings or the elderly, that passion inside you exists for a reason. So I'm here today to encourage you, don't water down that passion. Go after that uncomfortably specific niche that you want to follow, and the bookings will come.
Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and welcome to episode 400. Holy cow, this is one of those things that is surreal at times. There have been lots of moments throughout this time hosting the podcast where I have felt like maybe I should just quit this. Maybe I should give this up. It feels like I'm kind of running on a treadmill and I'm working hard, but I'm not getting anywhere. But at the end of the day, I continue to come back because I truly love the conversations that I'm able to have with photographers. And on top of that, I love hearing from you that these conversations have helped you in some way. And it's just truly incredible. So after 400 episodes, it's just, again, it's surreal. I guess that's really the only thing that I could think of. But this isn't going to be just a massive celebration episode. I want this to still be actionable and helpful for you, the listener. So what I did was I thought, it would be great after 400 episodes. This is kind of a milestone. I thought that it would be wonderful for me to share. I end every episode with 3 takeaways that I got from the interview. So why not share 3 takeaways that I've learned from all the interviews combined, right? My time interviewing all of these world-class photographers, these amazing photographers who decide to come on and share how they see the world with me. Why don't I share my biggest takeaways of hosting this podcast for 400 episodes with you? Because sometimes 400 episodes can be a lot of information to process. So let's boil that down into just 3 simple takeaways. And on top of that, I thought, what else would be great? What if I reached out to some past guests and asked them, what is something that you wish you knew when you first got started in photography? Or what is something that you think new photographers need to know about making it as far as becoming the photographer who you want to be, being a productive photographer, and even some guests share what it takes to get into business as well. So much here because so many guests had responded and shared their information, which I now get to share with you. So again, I'm really excited for this episode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with my number 1 takeaway, right, that I've learned from the podcast. And I guess number 1 in the sense that maybe it's not the biggest. I don't think that there's an order of most important to least important out of the 3. I think it's just 3 that are very important to take away, I suppose, and implement into your photography. So I'm going to share the first one with you right now, and that is just the importance of making photography fun. Because when I had first started the podcast, I had started the podcast from the mindset of, or from the perspective of being a professional photographer. And I think if you listen back to some of those first episodes, we even start off talking about business quite a bit in those first handfuls of episodes. And I think I've realized within myself that while I found wedding photography rewarding and it paid the bills, I think when it comes to business, my mind has a very hard time following a specific plan, right? I'm more of an ideas guy. I like to come up with new ideas, and then very rarely do I implement them until completion. But when I have an idea, I'll start something new, and then, maybe that's it. And when it comes to the business side of things, maybe that's not the best way to go about it, because often I would feel overwhelmed. And once again, like, what am I doing here? The business is working, but it's not what others would consider a success. So since leaving weddings at the end of last year, I've really kind of found this new outlook on photography, less so transactional and more so just fulfilling to myself, really. So that is why my biggest takeaway has been to make photography fun, and how important it is to not compare yourself to others, because what's the phrase? Comparison is the thief of joy. And when we look at others' work, which it's very hard not to do, whether you're on Instagram or on Facebook, or you're looking online, or even if you're in the Beginner Photography podcast community, it's hard to not look at others' work and think to yourself, wow, they're doing it. They've done this. I wish I was to that point. And again, when we start comparing ourselves to others, that can steal the joy that we have in photography, rather than using photography as a way to focus on personal growth and enjoyment. When I went out, and one of my hobbies outside of photography is disc golf. I love disc golf, but when I first got into it, a buddy who I would go out with, who was more experienced than me, would go out, and he would just effortlessly throw, 240 yards, just go for it, 240 feet rather, and just go for it. And here I would come up to the tee box, and I would just, Pele this thing as hard as I could, just like really give it a lot of effort, and it might go 80 feet. Like, it was really embarrassing, and it wasn't fun, because at the end of the game, I might end plus 35, plus 40 over par, and that's not a good score at all. While, my buddy might end plus 10, plus 12, just clearly a much, much better player than I was. And when you're in that position, when you're comparing yourself to somebody else, that's not fun. But I was discounting the years of work that he had put into learning and playing disc golf and getting better and going out there when he sucked and working on it because he enjoyed it, and again, becoming better to be the person who he was when him and I were playing. So when I was playing to compare myself to him, I was not having a good time. It was not fun. It felt like, a struggle. But then when I remembered to myself, I really had to ground myself. Like, why is this not fun? It's because I'm losing. Okay, but why am I out here? Am I out here to win a championship? Am I out here to prove that I'm the best? No, I'm out here to enjoy a beautiful Sunday morning with some friends and bring us closer together. Like, that's why I'm out here. And suddenly when I looked at that way, it was a beautiful Sunday morning. We're out playing, having a good time, building stronger connections with each other. And now, regardless of whatever the score was, it now became more enjoyable. That my goal was being achieved every single time, even though I would lose. Embarrassingly bad. And the same is true in photography. When you first get started and you go out there, you know that your camera can take great photos. You're not exactly sure how, but you see you know that you can take a decent photo every once in a while, and you get one and you're like, wow, that was a good one. But then you look at other photographers and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, like, how am I ever going to get to this level? It seems so far away that it's very discouraging. And that is no fun. But here's the thing. If you give up right then, you lose. If I would have given up on disc golf, right away, once I lost so horribly bad a number of times to my buddy, then I wouldn't have continued to go out. I wouldn't have continued to play. I wouldn't have continued to practice. I wouldn't have had these conversations where I learned, maybe rotate your body like this. Maybe pull your arms straight instead of in a semicircle. And suddenly my drives are getting further. My accuracy is getting better. I understand more about when I should use which disc and why. How to get the disc to turn where I want it to and how I want it to. And then before you know it, weekend before last, I ended +9. I was shocked. I was like, holy cow. Not only am I out here and enjoying my Sunday morning and building these deeper connections with friends, but also now I'm getting pretty good at disc golf, and that makes it even more enjoyable. And when it comes to photography, I want you to do the same thing. Don't give up because it's hard right now. The more that you shoot, the better you're going to get. I keep saying that. I end every episode with, the more you shoot today, the better you're going to be tomorrow. You have to do that. You're going to get better, and then you're going to have more fun. Plus, remember, those images that you see online, when somebody shares their work, and this happens with you as well, you're only going to share your best stuff. But you're not seeing all the photos where they missed focus, or all the photos where the composition was terrible, or all the photos where their subject was blinking, or whatever it was. You're only seeing the keepers. But when you look at your work, you are seeing the photos where you missed focus. You are seeing the photos with the terrible composition. You are seeing the photos where you blink. So you just naturally assume that you're a worse photographer than they are, when that isn't necessarily true. So really, I encourage you to keep photography fun. Come up with a new goal that is going to align with your interests for the reason why you're getting into photography, because it's not to be the best image creator in the world. It's for a reason. Maybe it's to document your travels or capture memories of your kids. Whatever it is, you got to follow that. And that is how you keep photography fun. When you change the goalpost, when you change the goal for the reason why you're going out there to match exactly why you're going out there, you got to keep photography fun. Go out and just shoot something. So that was my number one takeaway, to make photography fun. So right now, how about we go ahead and get on into what some of these guests have to share, right? Some past guests. I'm very excited about this because, again, not only did they take the time to submit this information here, but also it's just so cool to be able to share this with you. So without that, let's go ahead and get on into, this is the first voicemail that I got, and this is from Anya Puhlman.
Hi, my name is Anya. I run a business called Anya Puhlman Photo and Film. I'm a documentary family photographer and a personal brand photographer and filmmaker. I think the thing that got me to where I am now is listening to myself and not get distracted so much by what other people did or told me what I should do. My approach to photography and video is very much rooted in playing and experimenting and testing. And at the beginning, I photographed everything and then followed the path of what others did, and I didn't enjoy it. And now I really make time for passion projects that help me improve my skills and, most importantly, show me what I actually enjoy doing. That process doesn't happen within a week or a month, but only through continuous experimenting. Our priorities and our taste changes, and that's okay. So it's important to not get distracted by what others do and what they tell you what you should do if it doesn't align with your values or you just don't enjoy it. So my suggestion to you is go play, experiment as often as you can, and watch your photography get better and better over time. Thank you.
So good. Listen to your gut, try passion projects, and go play. Love it. All right, next we got Dan Milner.
Wow. Did I read this correctly? 400 episodes? I thought I was crazy with all the nonsense that I have going on online, and you immediately put me to shame. Well, maybe I should say not immediately, but consistently put me to shame. What did I learn about photography that I wish I knew earlier? Man, where does the list begin? There are so many things, but I think number one would be to branch out, be more well-rounded. I was so myopically focused on photography for the first probably 20 to 25 years of my career. That's all I thought about. That's all I did. Every trip, every travel, every move, every night, every party, every opening, every thought, every journal entry was photography. And the truth is, I was not very interesting as a human being. I was a good photographer, but I wasn't great as a human being. So I would branch out. I'm much more interested now in topics that are related to photography. I think photography is much more powerful now as a small part of a larger conversation. Don't be the geeky guy who talks about equipment. Don't be the person who can only talk about photography. Good clients want good humans. They don't want just good photographers. I would also take a lot more chances, and I would not be hesitant to fail on a consistent basis and also acknowledge the fact that I failed on a consistent basis. We live in a world where everyone's afraid to be themselves because that may or may not build following. And if you're only presenting a phony, palatable version of yourself at this point in time, everybody knows what you're doing and everyone can see through it. So stop and just be yourself. And if that means you've got prickly, pointy parts that aren't necessarily palatable for huge audiences of people, that's okay. because it's better to have 5 true friends than 5,000 bots and strangers who you may or may not know. Enjoy the process, read as much as possible. Even though you're a photographer, write as much as possible. I think the combination of those two things is great. And just know that if you're one of these unfortunate souls, and I fall into this category from time to time now, that is being tasked with shooting still photographs, recording motion, recording sound, writing, producing, traveling, and doing all that by yourself, just know that something has to give. You can't do 4 or 5 things at the same time to the best of your ability. Something will suffer. So when push comes to shove, choose the 1 or 2 things that are more important to you, and do those to the best of your ability. And lastly, give back. Find ways to give back. Help other photographers. Donate equipment. Donate to NGOs. Help people that are running programs and operations that are far larger and far more important than yourself. And there's plenty of those folks out there. So just do more, be more, and give back more to society and culture in general. And of course, keep watching the Beginner Photography Podcast, because this is like oxygen. Without this, nothing matters. This is the foundational piece of human existence. Let's be honest.
Geez, the foundational piece for human existence. That is wild. That's a lot of pressure suddenly put upon my shoulders. My gosh. But I love what you had said there, Dan, about being more well-rounded. That can be hard when we have this new thing and we're so excited about it and we try to be the best that we can. But fantastic advice, and I appreciate you. Next up here, we got the one and only Vanessa Joy.
Congratulations on your 400th episode. The Beginner Photography Podcast, I know, has helped so many photographers in their journey and their careers, and I'm just looking forward to seeing what you do next. If I were to give advice to anyone here that's a beginner photographer or towards the beginning of their career, it would be prepare for the long haul. Being a photographer and having a sustainable career just doesn't start and happen by magic. And even if it does, and I don't know, you go viral or something and it happens really fast, you still have to prepare to sustain that growth. So do everything you can to build an amazing foundation to build your business upon, and then just watch it grow. Oh, by the way, I'm Vanessa Joy. Thanks so much for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast.
It's so weird to hear. Yeah, building a strong foundation is one of the most important things, and I've talked about it before. You get excited about photography, you start something new, and you start off with step 9, and then you go to 12, and then, you forget that you got to go back to 6, and it can really put a damper on the fun or enjoyment that is photography. It is so important to build that strong foundation to grow off of. So thank you so much, Vanessa. All right, next one we got here is from Simon Ringsmooth.
My name is Simon Ringsmooth. I run a photo blog called Weekly 50. I've been doing that for over 10 years, and also have a side project called Stevens Creek Photography, where I do family and individual portraits and headshots. And even after all this time, I still consider myself a beginner. And if I could give one piece of advice to any new photographers out there, it's to keep doing what you're doing. Keep listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast, other photography podcasts. Keep using your camera. Keep learning from others. And there's never an end to this journey. There's always more to learn. So what an exciting time for photographers, whether you are a true beginner or you've been doing this for years and years. There's always more things to learn and more people to meet and more ways to grow. So thank you, Raymond, for doing this podcast and for helping so many people on their photography journey. And for all those listening and still learning, keep doing what you're doing. Keep up the good work, everyone.
Holy cow. That's it. It does not end. It doesn't end. So if there's no way that you can possibly learn everything in photography, why not sit back, slow down, and enjoy the ride a little bit? That was so great. All right, here's a voicemail from Scott Strazzanti.
Hey, Raymond, it's Scott Strazzanti calling in from Northern California. Congratulations on your 400th episode. Even though I'm far from a beginner, I learn something new every time I listen to one of your episodes, so keep it up. Looking back on my early days in my career, I think one of the things I wished I'd done is photograph my everyday life, photograph the mundane. I started heavily into photography in the 1980s, and I don't have any photography from back then. I wish I just had a photo of a grocery store or the movie theater or just anything that just kind of showed what the world looked like. I know we look around every day now and everything looks boring and normal, but in 40 years from now, it's going to look fantastic. I always tell people, especially early photographers, if you want to create a great body of work, just go around your town and photograph what it looks like. Give some context. Shoot loose. What does the front of the movie theater look like? What does the library look like? What does the coffee shop look like? And make some prints and put those prints away and pull them back out in 30, 40 years. And you'd have a gallery show just of, wow, look at that. Look what the cars used to look like. Look what, this and that. And remember those silly things and just things that we kind of take for granted. Document them and put them away. I know we all kind of struggle with archiving our images. A lot of people just have all their images on a phone or on one hard drive or on their computer. It's like you're going to have to make some prints or shoot with film or do something, or these images that we make now will not be accessible in the future. So think of yourself as a historian, not just a photojournalist or a photographer. Just kind of set your goals to just be the eyes in for the people of the future. So congrats again, and I'm really excited to be part of your past, and I hope I'll be part of the future. Take care. Bye-bye.
Scott always leaves me with something to think about for sure. I think it was something that he said in his interview that actually had got me to create a folder within my Lightroom catalog of I guess it's going to be a project called Nouns, just people, places, and things. Things like cars, what they look like Scott was saying. Things like what a box of Cheez-Its looks like today in the store, because I know by looking at some photos of my mom's childhood, her photos, how different just a can of Pepsi looked in the 90s compared to today. So I absolutely love that, and I'm excited to make this more serious, because you're right, if it all just lives digitally, we got to make prints to make sure that they stick around forever. So Scott, again, thank you. That was awesome. That was so cool. Next voicemail we got here is from Anime Tonkin.
Hey, Raymond, it's Anime Tonkin. Wanted to jump on here to say congratulations on 400 episodes. I am blown away by that accomplishment and hope to emulate you one day over on This Can't Be That Hard. But in the meantime, I wanted to hop on here to not only congratulate you, but to congratulate everyone listening. You guys out there in the listening audience are doing exactly what you need to do to build and grow profitable, sustainable businesses that you love. Trying to reinvent the wheel on your own by figuring everything out alone is a quick path to burnout in this industry. And so by diving into podcasts and other kinds of education, you are giving yourselves the foundation that you absolutely will thank yourselves for later. So keep doing what you're doing. Congratulations again, Raymond, and hopefully we'll get to talk soon.
See, you got to build that foundation. I told you, there's something to it. It is real. It is real. But I love what Anime had said, that there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Learn from those who have come before you and implement that yourself. Make it your own, of course, and then just go. I love that. Next up, we have a voicemail here from Damien Lovegrove.
Hi, I'm Damien Lovegrove, and recently I had the pleasure of sharing some of my thoughts, ideas, and tips on photographing people on this podcast. There are many distractions that I've encountered on my 40-year journey in photography, and the biggest two of these were the technology and the kit. I've spent way too many hours researching kit and way too much money buying kit. It definitely put me back years. Looking through my back catalogue while I'm selecting pictures for my next book, I can see that some of my best work was taken on very basic 12 megapixel cameras from Canon, Nikon and Fujifilm, with simple lenses too. Any camera and a standard lens is good enough to create fabulous photographs. My snippet of advice is not to buy more kit. Spend your money on setting up shoots, traveling to locations, taking pictures, and printing your output. These are the fun parts of the process, and the experience of being out there taking photographs is where the learning takes place. Use your time to think about what your photography is saying, where you want your photography journey to take you next. Congratulations, Raymond, on reaching 400 editions of the Beginner Photography Podcast.
Whoa. Wow. Spend your money not on gear, but on the experiences in shooting and traveling. That is so great. That's what we all want, right? We all want to photograph something unique and different. but something unique and different to us, right? And that's why we travel. That's why we love to take photos of our adventures or experiences. And that is so great. You don't need the best gear to photograph those things, but being able to photograph those things with just your basic gear is more than enough. So don't let the gear hold you back. Damien, thank you so much for that. That was great. All right, next we got Tavia Redburn. This is good.
Hi, friend. My name is Tavia Redburn, and I want to talk to the photographer listening to this who has a dream to go full-time with photography. If you have a desire to make photography your full-time income, I want to tell you one thing I wish I knew when I first started out, and that was the importance of choosing an uncomfortably specific niche. When you're first starting out, you kind of want to photograph everything, right? And that's okay in the beginning. But when you get serious about business and when you get serious about going full time, you can grow so much faster if you choose a very specific niche. Because the truth is, you can't be everything to everyone. So if you have a passion to photograph horses or one-year-olds or elopement weddings or second-time weddings or the elderly, that passion inside you exists for a reason. So I'm here today to encourage you, don't water down that passion. Go after that uncomfortably specific niche that you want to follow, and the bookings will come.
Man, Tavia, that was so great. You can't be everything to everyone. You're absolutely right. That is so hard to learn in the beginning, where you just feel like, well, the camera can shoot anything, so let's go ahead and try everything. And trying everything is one thing, but going forward with that, you truly can't be everything to everyone. So good. Next up, let's hear from Henrique Murta.
So this is Henrique Murta. I'm a drone photographer, a nature photographer. And if there's something I wish I knew earlier in my photographic journey, was the importance of the use of panoramas. So whenever you go to a place and the landscape is too wide and you just feel you can't get all of it in your frame, just forget about having one frame. Just shoot many photos, like in a way that after you're going to be able to merge them and just get a feeling that's a little bit closer to what you were really like experiencing when you were out there in the impressive natural landscape. So yeah, I hope you like my tip.
One thing that I love about shooting panoramas is that you can do it with one less lens. You don't necessarily need to have a 16 millimeter full frame lens to get everything that you want. You can use a 50 millimeter lens and shoot 3 or 4 photos to create a panorama, and then either stitch together in Photoshop later or do whatever it is that you want with that. Now, is it easier than just putting on a wide angle lens? No, but when you're first getting started in photography and maybe you don't have all the kit, it is great to have these little tricks in your back pocket that you can do and still achieve what it is that you're looking for. So that was a great tip. Okay, let's hear now from Shane Balkowicz.
Hello, this is Shane Balkowicz at Nostalgia Glass Wet Plate Studio in Bismarck, North Dakota. I've been on the Beginner Photography podcast a couple of times with Raymond, and I'm very excited for his upcoming 400th episode. He's asked for some advice to new photographers, and the one piece of advice that I could give is that you do not need to have any formal schooling or take classes or even read books to become a photographer. I'm completely self-taught, and I learned the process of photography by trial and error, and if I can do it, anyone can do it. Secondly, it's about online critiques that you will find people throwing at you here and there once you start feeling the confidence to share your photography with others. What I would advise you to do is take everything with a grain of salt and to find a group of photographers whose works you admire and take advice from them. I think that's the best method. Just taking advice from just anyone who's willing to throw it at you online. Most of these people you'll find aren't even qualified to give such advice. So that's kind of a pitfall that I would try to avoid. And just continue to make exposures one after another, try to learn from yourself, and by trial and error, you will eventually get there.
Truer words have never been spoken. By trial and error, you will get there. I love that. Shane, thank you so much for sharing, especially, from somebody who has no formal education. If anybody can speak to the power of trial and error, it is Shane. And if you look into the process in which he shoots, man, there's a lot of steps. It is not just go to YouTube and figure out how to shoot manual or whatever. There's a lot more to it. There's chemistry. It's a very expensive process as well. So if it's true for Shane, it has to be true for the watered down version of photography that we do, that is digital photography. So Shane, thank you so much for sharing that. All right, now let's hear from Dory Howell.
Hi, Raymond. This is Dory Howell. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your 400th episode podcast. And congratulations so much on reaching this milestone. The biggest thing I think I've learned in my journey of 15 years of being in the photography business is the fact when I first started, I would get very worked up and very anxious and scared about certain things. And I felt like if I just did certain things and I've just reached certain milestones, I would stop being scared, and everything would just automatically fall into place. Like if I reached a certain monetary goal, or I did so many sessions, or I learned how to do something with my camera that I couldn't do before. And reaching all those milestones was great. I loved it when I reached 6 figures and beyond. I loved it when I was able to master off-camera flash. But the fact of the matter is that every time I reached a certain milestone, a new thing popped up that I needed to be afraid of. Like when I reached 6 figures and more, it was like, oh my gosh, now I really need to consider hiring people. How do I hire people? What do I do? And all of those different milestones were awesome to reach, but they weren't the end all be all of my business. And they didn't solve a lot of the anxiety and fear that I had when it came to running my business. Those fears just became different. It wasn't until I really realized that I needed to be comfortable in the fear and acknowledge the fear, and also just be ready for it. That certain things are going to pop up along the way, whether it came to raising prices, switching niches, all those different things that could have stopped me in my tracks. And my fear was either going to stop me from growing, or it was going to perpetuate me and move me forward. And I chose to let it move me forward. So my biggest advice when I'm talking to new photographers is, hey, don't let the fear stop you. Understand that fear is part of the game. Sometimes anxiety is part of the game. As Glennon Doyle says, we can do hard things. You can get past those hurdles in the road, and you never know what you're going to see on the other side unless you go for it. So go for it. Don't be afraid, and realize that it's all just part of the journey. Thank you, Raymond, so much.
Do not let fear stop you. Wow. I know that it's easier said than done, of course, but truly I can speak to the truth that is within that. There were plenty of times where I was scared. I was scared to raise my prices. I was scared to switch from Canon to Fuji. I thought maybe my clients would notice and they would hate it. I thought that I might hate it, that I might miss shots. I was worried that by raising my prices, I was going to alienate people. All these things, the fear sets in, but that's where you have to know kind of your goal. What is it that you want to achieve? And then how do you get there? And if making a full-time income, you have to charge more, then, well, it sucks that you have to alienate people, but you have to survive. You got to do that. You have to grab hold of that fear and not let it stop you. So Dory, thank you so much for sharing. That is so cool. All right, next, longtime listeners are going to know this name. We got Matt Druin.
Hey Raymond, it's Matt with Matthew Druin Photography. Congratulations, and thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate being a part of this. I have a few things I think might be helpful for people. One is to focus on the craft and not the gear. Gear is only important when you can't afford not to upgrade. Practice the 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Prepare to succeed. If you're wanting to switch to full-time, for example, maybe work that 9 to 5 just a little bit longer so you can build up a nice, healthy safety net. Because in business, just like relationships, you don't want to start off struggling for money. And then learn to manage your household finances really well. If you can't manage your own life, you're going to find it really hard to manage a business. And I think that's all I got for you. Again, congratulations, and thanks again.
If you can't manage your own life, you're going to have a hard time managing a business. Oh, man, I got some stories, but that is absolutely true. It is so important to just have a basic financial literacy before you get into business, before you make any potential mistakes, because, I'll tell you what, the IRS is watching and they will know if you do make a mistake. And not that I've ever been audited or anything, but now that I said that, I'm sure that I will be audited this year. But it is never fun to, there's just a lot of things that are not fun. And it's easy to skip over them because, this isn't really that important. But they are. Everything is important, even the small things. So, Matt, thank you so much for sharing. And that was great. I love to hear it. I loved to hear from you as well. So next we got Brian Rogers Jr.
Hey, Raymond, it's Brian Rogers Jr. at Digital Art That Rocks. First off, I just wanted to say thanks so much for featuring me on your podcast a while back, and congratulations on your 400th episode. For those of you who don't know, I'm a commercial photographer and digital artist that specializes in product and architectural photography. If I could give new photographers any advice, it would be this. Find out what it is that you're truly passionate about photographing, and then imagine yourself getting hired to shoot that type of work. That sounds amazing, right? So how do you get there? It's actually pretty simple. It isn't easy, and it's going to take some time, but I promise it is achievable. Create a solid portfolio of the specific type of work that you're trying to get hired to shoot, and get it in front of the people that hire photographers to shoot that work. Over time and through that process, not only will you become an expert at it, you'll also develop your own style, which is key in standing out in a very crowded marketplace. And when you do get the call to shoot that job, you're going to feel confident that you can do the job because you've already done it and you have the portfolio to back it up.
Wow, that was like a step-by-step roadmap for how to become the photographer that you want to become. Brian, so much information there. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. And I know that listeners appreciate that as well. And last up, we have the one and only Gerard Exupery.
I think you should do a scoreboard of how many times people recorded their message, because this is the last time I'm doing it. And thank you for asking me to participate, Raymond. This is Gerard Exupery, if you need that. And when we did the first interview, which is going back about 4 years, I remember coming away from it thinking, number one, you're a great interviewer. You ask probing questions, intelligent questions. You listen entirely to the answers I'm giving. And when I go off on a tangent, you know how to either bring back to the subject or pull from that even more questions. And I was really impressed with that. The second interview we did was a year ago when I did the second book, and just more of the same. I felt much more comfortable. It didn't stop me from speaking a million miles an hour and going off on tangents, but it just made me feel like I had achieved something. It was kind of like a validation that, wow, I'm doing my second podcast with Raymond. So anyway, to have a library of information that you share freely is incredibly generous. And I think it's important. And I think that you got to keep doing it. I am very proud to have been a part of your podcast, and you're a good guy. And you should really keep doing this good thing you're doing because you're really good at it. Did I use good enough? I don't know. Take care, Raymond.
Gerard, man, you're making me blush over here, man. Thank you so much for the kind words. You're one of those photographers who I look up to as somebody who I would consider a productive photographer. You are taking the work that you have and you are sharing it with the world. You're putting it out there and you're sharing not only your unique perspective, but just some really interesting times with some really interesting stories to go along with it. So Gerard, again, man, thank you so much. And that was quite a number of past guests who shared some of their best tips and ideas on photography for you to be able to take and implement yourself and become the photographer who you want to be. But now that we've listened to all of these guests who were kind enough to share with you, I think it's time for me to share my number 2 takeaway, which is to tune everybody out and to find your own voice. Yes, I know that you just spent the last 30 minutes or so listening to what others had to say in the hopes that you could take something away. And truly, I hope that you do. I encourage you to tune others out. And what that means is not to not listen to anybody. It's not to become a recluse and move into a cave and only just glue a camera to your eye and just shoot for the next 40 years or whatever. But it's more nuanced than that, obviously. And it's that I don't want you to let popular opinion dictate your style or approach to photography, because that is a very easy trap to fall into. I remember after one of my first launches for my course, Auto to Amazing, which is all about helping you learn how to shoot in manual. And I heard from Saul, who was, a longtime listener of the podcast, and he said, I didn't think that learning manual was important until something clicked within me that said, wait a second, everybody else who shoots with an iPhone, and they're not controlling their settings, obviously, because it's just automatic and it's an iPhone, their iPhone is taking the exact same photo as everybody else's iPhone. So learning manual and learning to take control of your camera is really what is going to set your photography apart. And you may be thinking, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense. There's things like composition and lighting that you could do as well, and you can make your images stand out, which is fine. But when it comes to opinions, if we take a step back and look at what opinions are, we can see the opinions, and we get opinions not so much by people telling us directly like, hey, Raymond, you need to shoot like X, Y, and Z, and you need to do these things. But we see them in looking at the works of others and seeing what is popular. And that is why I feel so strongly against spending so much time on Instagram or Facebook or wherever else you see photos where the currency is getting a like on the photo or how many followers somebody can get, because suddenly we assume that if somebody has a large following, if somebody has a lot of likes on an image, well, then it's inherently good. Whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. We just believe that that is true. So we look to that photo and wonder, well, what is it about that photo that I can implement into my work? But like what Saul had realized when he was shooting with an iPhone, that's what everybody else is doing. They're looking at everybody else's work to see what is popular so that they could do the same thing, because that's what is quote unquote liked. And suddenly, when everybody is just looking to social media to see what is popular so that they can implement or replicate it and then post it on social media in the hopes of getting more likes, your work is going to look exactly like everybody else's work. The only way to stand out is to develop your own unique and personal vision. It's your perspective that is what makes you you. So how do you do that? It's impossible to come up with an idea all on your own when you have 90,000 voices going in your head. Imagine for a second listening to 3 different podcasts, having the TV on, somebody's reading the newspaper, like all of these things going on. It is impossible for you to think and for you to develop your own ideas for what you want. And it's exactly true with photography. When all of this is going on, when you're seeing all of these photos and people like them, hundreds, thousands of likes, it's hard for you to develop your own personal style in photography. So focus on what it is that you like and focus on how you can improve rather than seeking that quote unquote shortcut for what is a great photo and then trying to emulate that. The only way to do that is to tune others out so that you can hear and find your own voice. All right, now I want to do something a little bit different. Before, we just listened to a bunch of guests and their tips on the podcast, but I've also reached out to a number of you listeners to share something about the podcast with us. So now, first, that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and listen to Anne. And remember, at the end of this, I'm going to share my number 3 takeaway with you from everything that I've learned by doing this podcast. So here is Anne.
Hello, my name's Anne. I'm from Australia. Love the podcast, so thank you so much for all your advice on that. But my main takeaway has been capturing the moment. That's resonated with me. You used one of my photos in your newsletter. It just G'd me up so much, and it just gave me so much confidence that I've tried to do that, capturing the moment. Thank you.
Man, I love that accent. So unique, so different from anything that we hear here in America. So, Anne, thank you so much. Capturing the moment is something that I feel is so important. And when you figure out what the moment is for you and you chase that relentlessly, you're going to be absolutely unstoppable. So thank you for sharing. All right, next, let's hear from listener Mark.
Hello, this is Mark from Pennsylvania. I've been listening to you for about 6 months, but I think the episode that really moved me, it was very recent. It was about reigniting your joy, and you had made a statement about tearing your pictures apart. And one of them was to go to black and white and color on them. And I have had the most fun, and it's helped me see composition issues. It's helped me get a feel for, in a color picture, colors that go well together. So that's been the one that's been the best. Thanks.
Oh, Mark, I'm so glad that you took that to heart and that you have actually done that. For everybody who is listening who's wondering, what are we ripping apart? We're not physically ripping apart our images, but more of in a figurative sense, right? When we look at our images and we're trying to figure out how can we improve, what is it that we like? One thing that I love to do is to turn my images more from a passive experience of just looking at an image to an active experience by I use an app on my iPad called Procreate. I turn the photo black and white, and then I take all the color brushes or pens, and then I will draw on the image. I will highlight the people. And it's not just highlight, but it's like, imagine that you just have a black and white photo in front of you like a coloring page, and now you have some colors, and you just decide to like outline what stands out to you, essentially. And what you'll find is that very quickly you recognize the things that do stand out and what is distracting as well, because once you see what it is that you like, you see the elements that you wish were better too. So I encourage you to do the same thing. It is a ton of fun. It is super easy, and it is very effective at learning how you can improve your own work. So Mark, again, thanks so much for reaching out and sharing that. But next we have Tony. Let's hear from Tony.
Hi everyone, Tony here. I'm sure you might have seen some of my posts in the Facebook group or recently on the new website. I've been listening for a little over a year now. I've been shooting for about 4 years. Photography is still something that's very new to me, and I'm still sort of finding my groove and finding my rhythm. But I have been listening to the Beginner Photography podcast because I think it's a wonderful podcast and it's a great source of knowledge and expertise. And I think when I first started photography, I wanted to find a podcast that would be easy to listen to and give me some great tips along the way and a place to hear from experts. And a lot of places and podcasts, they're really trying to sell you on something, versus I think the Beginner Photography podcast is a great introductory place. Like I said, I've been listening for about a little over a year, but I want to comment on a more recent episode, which was episode 394, Manifesto Part 7, The Only Photographer You Are in Competition With Is Yourself. This was a big episode for me because at the end of the day, I think a lot of what I've been doing in the last 4 years is using social media to share my art, right? I look at photography as an art form. I don't necessarily know that I want it to be a full-out business yet, but I've always had a creative spark. So I use that social media platform, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, to sort of share my art. And I think the episode does this really great job of, while these can be good tools to use and these can be great places to meet and connect, what happens a lot is you're in competition, right? You're constantly looking at what other people are posting, and you're looking at what other artists are posting and what other photography, is getting the spotlight. So it really brings this sort of comparison view to your own work. And I think that's not what we should be doing, right? We should be exploring our work in terms of what we're able to do and pushing ourselves to what we can do. And I think the idea of taking a break from social media, right, in the sense of don't go on there just to scroll and look at the pictures, right? Because what you're going to do is you're either going to try to replicate that in something that's not original, or you're going to get down on yourself for not having maybe the skill level that you think you should have. So for me, it was a great episode to really just encourage me to get out there and just take pictures, right? And take pictures for myself, take pictures for what interests me and no one else, and find that creative spark and not worry about what other people are posting and not worry about what other artists are showing, because I think it can be a rabbit hole as we dig down into it. We view things that we don't need to look at, right? We're just, as I said in the podcast, right, we're just comparing ourselves to everyone else, and it's not about comparison, it's about growth. So I think it was a great episode for me, and I look forward to many more. Thank you so much.
Well, this is awkward. It's great that that is your takeaway there, Tony, because obviously that was my number 2 takeaway, to tune out others and to find your own voice. I would truly love to hear, Tony, from you if you do decide to take a break from social media or decide to take a break from just looking at others' work and just focusing on your own and how you could get better. I would love to hear how that goes and whether or not it did improve your photography, but I can't imagine that it doesn't. So James, Tony, thank you so much for sharing that. Next, we have James. So let's hear from James.
Hey, Raymond, it's James Hunick here. I've been following the Beginner Photography podcast for, a couple of years now. And I think the biggest thing that I learned was that it's okay just to do it. I joined the photography community when you did a series of interviews of people who got their start in photography almost by accident. It's wedding photographers who had a friend who saw a kit lens camera and said, "Could you do my wedding?" And now they're total successes. Or other photographers who stumbled into it in a similar way. Listening to your podcast gave me the courage to say, well, let's just go and do it. And so I did. And this year, my photography business keeps growing and growing, and it's been amazing as I'm focusing on the sports photography niche. So while it's just been a great way for me to get the confidence to say, well, if they could do it by stumbling into it, maybe I can too. Thanks.
You just got to do it. That is it. James, so good. But, on top of just doing it is that, or I guess what that is just taking action. You're taking action on the things that you hear, and you're going out and you're doing them. So all of the praise goes to you on that one. So congrats for taking what it was that you learned and implementing it. And I'm glad to hear that it is paying off. So James, again, thank you so much. All right, next, let's hear from Nikki.
Hey, Raymond. This is Nikki Ferrand from Lima, Peru. I just wanted to congratulate you on your 400th episode. We've come a long way together without you knowing this, but I've been following you since the beginning of the pandemic, and you have helped me quite a lot on my work. I started my photography business in those times, about 3 years ago, and I can say that almost all of your episodes have brought something good into my business and my life. So thank you very much, and let's go for 400 more.
Wow, Nikki, yeah, super weird. That that's one of the weirdest things about hosting this podcast is that to me, I'm just this guy who's sitting in a spare bedroom and talking to my computer. But to others, I'm in your car with you. I'm at the gym with you. I'm doing the dishes with you. Maybe not doing the dishes unless you have like a lot of dishes. And that's, I'm sorry to hear that. That sounds terrible. But I love that you've been able to take what it is that you have learned and once again, actually put in the work to get something done. So Nikki, thank you so much. From Indianapolis, Indiana to Lima, Peru. I appreciate you. So thank you, Nikki. Next, let's hear from a fellow Raymond. We got Raymond Toombs here.
Hey, Mr. Hatfield. This is Raymond Toombs, actually out of Rochester, New York. Love your stuff. Love the podcast. I have been listening since episode 1. Actually went back and listened to everything. But my big takeaway has been 2 of the episodes that you had Vincent Puglisi, I believe I pronounce it correctly. Just phenomenal. I'm really into the sports photography and looking at his books and reading them and actually listening to what he has to say about being bold and getting yourself connected with the right people really pushed me along the way and allowed me to get myself into our local minor league team and a lot of other locations to be able to practice my photography, of course, and get better at it and someday maybe do a major league game like I want to do. Thank you.
Yeah, Vinny is one of those guys who he's the real deal. He has done it. He's been there. He's forgotten more about photography than I can ever hope to experience. And what a cool takeaway. So from Raymond to Raymond, congratulations. And I am rooting for you that you can shoot that major league game. I would love to hear about it when it happens for you. Lastly, we got Bethany. So let's hear from Bethany. This is so much fun. I really enjoy this. All right, let's hear from Bethany.
Hi, Raymond. Congratulations on 400 episodes. That is absolutely fantastic. That is no small feat. You should be very proud. My name is Bethany. I have listened to some of the very first episodes. I have listened to some of the very latest episodes. I have listened to some of the episodes in between, and they are all amazing, and they provide me with a little bit of tips and tricks and what I'm looking for at the time that I'm looking for it. So again, congratulations. That is no small feat. 400. Wow. In terms of what brought me to you, I was in an accident. I was injured pretty badly, and I put the camera away for about 4 years. And just recently, actually, this summer, took it out of the closet. I stared at it, and I thought, where do I start? What do I do from here? So I hopped online, I Googled my little heart out, and I popped on your podcast one day in my car, and you really just spoke to me. And it was some of the earlier episodes, and then I thought, okay, I can do this. I can get back into this. Like, I can do this. So hats off to you. Hats off to the community, which is really what keeps me coming back. Not only the incredible content of your podcast, but the community that keeps me coming back. And I would say if I had to pinpoint one of the, I guess, biggest things that I took away from your podcast in just the short time that I've been listening is to bring my camera everywhere with me. And it's on so many of your episodes. And you talk about how gear doesn't matter, and it's really how you view the world. So I just want to say thank you, because you've given back to me the ability to view the world in a way that I used to, and I lost for a little bit. So it's been really powerful for me, and I so appreciate it. And I dove back in, and I'm ready to go, and I'm really excited to be a part of this community, and I'm really excited for you to have hit 400 episodes, because again, that's incredible. So thanks so much for all you do, for all the guests you host, for all the work that I'm sure you do behind the scenes for this incredible community that you have built, and you should be really proud. Thanks.
Geez, thank you, Bethany. I am proud. It's one of those things that as much work that goes into it, from finding interesting photographers to reaching out to them and hoping that they respond, and hoping that they take a look at my calendar to book a time. And then once they do, coming up with questions and going through the interview process, and then realizing that this is a good conversation. So you don't actually ask any of the questions that you had written down because you didn't want to bring your own agenda to it, and you wanted to let the conversation unravel naturally, to the final part of it, which is the editing, the recording an intro and an outro, to putting it all together, formatting it in the right way for all the podcast places, and getting it out to the world, and making a newsletter, and hopefully sharing just a little bit of information so that you can take that and learn something about photography, or stay motivated in photography when maybe you weren't, or again, learn something that you didn't know. And hopefully that changes just a little bit. And if a tiny portion of you take what it is that you learn and you implement it, then all of this has been well worth the amount of work. So again, Bethany, I am glad that an episode or two has resonated with you, and that you were on your way to becoming the photographer that you want to be. So thank you. But that brings me to my takeaway number 3. So let's go ahead and recap here, right? So the first takeaway that I had was how important it is to make photography fun. Takeaway number 2 was to tune others out to find your own voice. And takeaway number 3 is do. It's do. Do the thing. Do the thing. You're here. You're listening to this podcast. Maybe you watch YouTube videos. Maybe you buy photography books. Maybe you read blog posts. For what? You're doing it because you want to become a better photographer. But doing those things doesn't make you a better photographer. It never will. You could listen to all the podcasts. You could watch all the videos, read all the books, all the blog posts, and you won't be a better photographer. The only way to do that is to apply what you learn, put the camera to your face, hold it up to your eye, press that shutter button. That's it. That is it. And I hate how small this sounds, because often it just gets overlooked and you don't go out and you shoot. And then you come back next week and you listen to another episode and you say, oh, wow, that was a really good tip, or that was a really good episode. But because you don't go out and you shoot, it's all for nothing. And if you enjoy photography, if photography is important to you, it is important to make time for. And it is important to go out and do the thing, to find enjoyment in the process of taking photos rather than just the outcome. I mean, how many times have I personally said, oh, I would love to go out and shoot, but gosh, the clouds look like garbage. And so that I don't go out. But I'm not going out to shoot for the outcome. I'm going out to shoot for the process of taking photos. That is what you need to find. What is your goal for taking photos? Because now when there's days when, oh man, look at the kids playing in the sprinkler. They are so, I should go get my camera. I don't even know if the battery's charged, honestly. Where's my lens? Is it in the bag or is it, by the time I get all that stuff, the moment's probably going to be over anyway. And then you don't shoot it. I've done that before. I've literally done that before. Like that happened to me just like a week and a half ago. So I'm not saying that I'm perfect. These things happen to me too, but I'm sharing this because I know that they happen to you. But what's the goal for me? The goal for me in taking photos of my kids is not to have photos of my kids. The goal for me is to have something that my kids can look back on 30 years from now and remember their childhood. So even if it wasn't the perfect moment, or as Henry Cartier-Bresson would say, the decisive moment, even if it's not that, it's going to be enough for them to spark that memory. And suddenly that photo, even though in your head is not going to win any sort of awards, is really important to your kids. So finding that goal for you in photography, your reason why, is paramount to encourage you to go out and shoot. And I'm not saying don't listen to podcasts, don't watch videos, don't read books. I mean, if there's something that you need to know, like if you know that you need to know lighting, you know that you need to know editing, you know that you need to know how to shoot in manual, then go learn those things. Sure. Go search for those things to learn and then consume them. But then do. You have to do. Because if you don't do, you don't. Do you want to be a photographer, or don't you want to be a photographer? You got to do. So, suggestions for this episode. It is so important to set personal goals, again, that align with your interest and motivate you to shoot. Find those personal goals. Also, schedule regular practice sessions to apply what it is that you've learned, to experiment with new techniques. If you learn something in these podcast episodes, if you hear something in a YouTube video that you watch, or you read something in a book, make time for it. Go experiment and try that thing. If it's important to you, again, make time for it. And lastly, reflect on your progress and identity as a photographer. And then look at areas for improvement without comparing yourself to others. That's the big thing, without comparing yourself to others. Look at your images and ask yourself, what do I like about this photo? What don't I like about this photo? What can be improved? And that's how you do it. That's it, and that's all. So, like I said, that is this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast, episode 400. And as always, thank you to CloudSpot for sponsoring the Beginner Photography Podcast and just helping to empower photographers. If you need help delivering photos and you're looking for an all-in-one solution to either deliver and even sell your photos online, I highly encourage you to check out CloudSpot. You can sign up for a free account over at deliverphotos.com. Thank you so much for listening to episode 400 of the Beginner Photography Podcast. If it's up to me, there will definitely be 400 more. So let's cross our fingers. Wow, that sounded really dark way to end this. So I'm just going to go ahead and close my mouth and let you go. Thank you again for listening to this episode of the podcast. And remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.